"Sir, I want to buy a dad," said the little girl, and the whole store went quiet. The toy store was loud and bright. Laughter echoed between the shelves. Toy trains chugged along tiny tracks. A bell near the entrance jingled every time a new child ran in, dragging their tired parent behind. But at the edge of the counter, standing quietly on her toes, was a little girl. Her name was Maya. She looked no older than 6. She wore a bright yellow shirt tucked into a coral pink skirt. Her shoes looked a little worn but clean. Her hair was neatly parted into 2 long braids, tied at the ends with colorful bands. In her tiny hand she held 2 crumpled $1 bills. And a small blue button? She wasn't browsing like the other children. She wasn't reaching for dolls or pressing noisy buttons. No, Maya looked serious, determined, like she had come for something important. Behind the counter was a tall man in a dark suit, leaning over the glass and watching the checkout system. Most people would have recognized him instantly from the business, magazines and morning shows. David, the billionaire who built the Granda toy company from scratch. He wasn't supposed to be there that day, but sometimes he visited his stores quietly, just to see how things were running. He didn't notice Maya until she spoke. Her voice was soft, but sharp enough to cut through the noise around her. "I want to buy a dad," she said. David blinked. He turned. Maya didn't flinch. She stood right there, pushing the $2 and the button onto the polished counter like it was a sacred offer. The cashier beside David froze. A man nearby stopped mid-step, holding a toy truck in one hand. The background music seemed to lower. David leaned in, unsure if he'd heard correctly. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" he asked quietly. Maya looked up, her eyes wide and honest. "My friend said you can buy anything in this store," she said, her voice steady. "So I came to buy a daddy, just for tomorrow." David's chest tightened. "A daddy?" Maya nodded. "We're having a Father's Day thing at school," she explained. "Everyone else has one. They're going to bring their dads to clap when we read our poems." David looked down at the money on the counter. 2 wrinkled bills and a blue button. "That's all I have," Maya added. "But I don't need a full-time one. Just someone who can come. Pretend. Clap a little. Smile once." David swallowed. In all his years of running billion-dollar companies, closing deals and navigating politics, he had never met a proposal like this. "I'm sorry, little one," he said slowly. "But we don't sell dads here." Maya didn't cry. She simply looked at her money, nodded once, and whispered, "I thought maybe, if I brought enough, I could have a dad for a day." Just then the door to the shop swung open. A woman rushed in, breathless, her headscarf slipping off her bun. She looked around, frantic, and then saw Maya. "Maya," she called. The little girl turned. "Mommy." The woman hurried over and crouched down, wrapping Maya in her arms. "I'm sorry," Maya said quietly. "But I needed to buy something." David watched them. The woman stood, brushing a hand over her skirt, her face flushed with panic and apology. "I'm so sorry," she said to David. "I work next door. She wanders sometimes when I'm cleaning offices. I told her to stay put." "She didn't wander," David interrupted gently. "She came here for something very important." The woman looked confused. David looked at the girl, then at the woman. Then he asked, "What's your name?" "Maria," she replied cautiously. "Maria Adams." He offered a hand. "I'm David." She shook it, unsure. "Thank you, Mr. David," she said. David looked down at Maya, who was now standing beside her mother, still clutching her crumpled money. And in that moment, something cracked open inside him. He gave a soft, rare smile. "Actually," he said, "I think Maya just gave me an idea." Maria tilted her head. "What kind of idea?" David looked between the two of them. "I might not be a daddy for sale, but maybe," he said slowly, "I can be one, just for a day." Maria didn't speak at first. She just looked at David like she wasn't sure if he was joking, or kind, or maybe both. Her fingers rested on Maya's shoulders, gently but firmly, like she was trying to hold everything in place, herself included. David stood still, hands in his coat pockets, his expression unreadable. "I don't mean to scare you," he said quietly. "I just think Maybe Maya deserves someone to clap for her tomorrow, even if it's just pretend. Maria blinked. Her lips parted like she had something to say, but all that came out was a soft sigh. She looked down at her daughter, who was now focused on the button on the counter, like it might still be part of the trade. She doesn't usually do this, Maria said at last. She's quiet, observant, but when she wants something, she asks, David said, nodding. Directly. Maria almost smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. She's never had a dad, she added softly. He left before she was born. We don't even have pictures. I tell her she's my miracle, but sometimes... She trailed off. David waited. She notices the things she's missing. Maria finished, her voice low, even when I try to fill every space. Outside, the street buzzed with everyday noise, but around the three of them, something felt still, like the air itself had paused. David looked down at Maya. She was humming quietly now, as if she hadn't just shaken the foundation of his perfectly measured world. You said the event is tomorrow? He asked. Maria nodded slowly. At 10, at her school around the corner. You really don't have to. I want to, David said. Maria's eyes searched his face. Why? David didn't know how to answer that. Maybe because she looked like someone who hadn't asked for anything in years. Maybe because the little girl reminded him of something he had once lost. Or maybe because he had spent too long watching life from behind glass. And for the first time in years, someone had looked straight through it. Instead, he said the only thing that made sense in the moment. She offered me $2 and a button. I've had people offer me much more for a lot less heart. That made Maria truly smile. It was tired, yes, but it was real. David glanced at Maya. Do you have something you're going to read tomorrow? Maya nodded eagerly. A poem. I wrote it myself. David crouched beside her. Then I'll be there, he said. And I'll clap the loudest. Maya grinned so wide her cheeks puffed. Just for one day? She asked. David smiled back. Just for one day. They walked out together, Maria on one side, David on the other, and Maya skipping between them, humming the tune of something that sounded a lot like hope. David didn't sleep much that night, not because of meetings, not because of emails or late-night stock alerts pinging his phone, but because of a little girl in a faded pink dress with eyes too wise for 6. He sat in his penthouse living room, the city lights stretching endlessly beneath him, and held the small blue button she had left behind. It must have fallen from her hand when they walked out together. He hadn't noticed until he got home. It was chipped at the edges, faded in the middle, probably from an old-school shirt, but he couldn't stop staring at it. A button, $2, and a request that hit harder than any boardroom negotiation. He could still hear her voice. Just someone to clap. Just for one day. David ran a hand down his face and exhaled. He had been called ruthless, brilliant, cold. He'd closed billion-dollar deals without blinking. But this wasn't about business. This was about showing up. And for the first time in years, he wanted to. The next morning, Maria stood outside the school gates, holding Maya's hand. She had combed her daughter's hair into perfect puffs and tied 2 small yellow ribbons at the top. Maya wore her favorite dress, the one with the flower stitched near the hem, and she couldn't stop bouncing. Do you think he'll really come? She asked for the 3rd time. Maria smiled tightly. Maybe, but remember, if he doesn't, it's okay. Maya nodded, but her eyes searched the street. And then, he came. David stepped out of a sleek black car. No suit today. He wore a navy sweater, simple dark slacks, and a watch that somehow still looked more expensive than anything Maria owned. But he looked softer, less like a headline, more like a man. Maya lit up like the morning sun. You came, she squealed, rushing toward him. David knelt just in time to catch her in a hug. She wrapped her arms around his neck like she'd done it 100 times. Maria stood still, stunned by how natural it looked. He stood and looked at her. I hope it's still okay, he said. She nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. Thank you for coming. They walked in together, past the gates and through the colorful hallway. Posters lined the walls, drawings of fathers, crayon scrawls, construction paper hearts. At the entrance to the classroom, Maya turned to the teacher with pride. This is my daddy, she said. Just for today, Inside, the room was buzzing. Kids ran around with paint on their hands and glitter in their hair. Cardboard forts, paper ties, and messy name tags covered the tables. David looked completely out of place. Too tall, too polished, too still. But Maya didn't care. She dragged him from table to table, making him fold paper airplanes, color pictures, and glue buttons onto a craft frame that said, "Best Dad Ever." Maria stood to the side, watching. The children giggled. The teachers whispered. A few of the parents stared, recognizing his face from magazines. But no one said anything, because in that room, he wasn't a billionaire. He was Maya's dad. Just for one day. At story time, Maya pulled him to the carpet and climbed into his lap. She handed him a handmade book titled, "My Daddy is a Superhero." David hesitated, then opened the first page. He read it slowly. His voice wasn't perfect. It cracked a little. But it was steady, warm. Halfway through, Maya leaned her head against his chest and whispered, "You feel like a real daddy." David looked up. Maria was standing just outside the door. Her hand was over her mouth. And for a brief moment, he understood something. He hadn't just come here for Maya. He had come here for himself. The classroom looked like a crayon box had exploded. Paper crowns, glitter glue, juice boxes tipped sideways on plastic tables. And right in the middle of the chaos stood Maya, grinning, proud, leading David around like he was her prize. "Come on, Daddy," she called, tugging his hand. David, who had once shaken hands with heads of state and turned down entire countries for deals, was now crouching next to a 6-year-old at a Play-Doh table, molding a wobbly green dinosaur. They moved through activity stations. David helped her cut out a paper tie, which ended up jagged and too short. She wore it anyway. He painted a rainbow that looked more like storm clouds. Maya told him it was perfect. He wore a lopsided crown with "Daddy for Today" written across it in orange marker. It tilted to one side. He never adjusted it. Maria watched from the doorway, hidden but unable to look away. She'd planned to drop off Maya's forgotten water bottle and leave quietly, but something about the sight of them, David, with Play-Doh on his sleeves, and Maya, laughing without a care, froze her feet. Her heart ached, not with sadness, but with something more dangerous. Hope. "Circle time," the teacher called. The children scrambled to the rug, each sitting beside their father or father figure. David sat down slowly, legs folded under him like he was learning how to be small in a room built for soft things. Maya nestled beside him, proud and glowing. "Today," the teacher announced, "we'll each share something special about our dad." Some kids spoke about soccer games, or how their dads made pancakes. Then it was Maya's turn. She stood, tiny and trembling, but her voice was clear. "My daddy doesn't yell," she began. "He doesn't slam doors. He holds my hand and reads me stories. He clapped for me today, and I think that's what daddies do." Silence. Even the fidgety kids were still. David stared at her like she'd turned the world inside out. "And sometimes," she added, looking straight at him, "they come when you need them, even if it's just for one day." Maya sat down, slid her hand into his, and leaned her head against his arm. David didn't speak. He just held her hand back, tight. From the hallway, Maria pressed her fingers to her lips as tears spilled down her cheeks. Quiet, reverent, stunned, because she had seen a lot of things in her life. Loss, scraping through hard days, holding it all together with too little sleep and too much love. But she had never seen her daughter look that safe, that full, that seen. David stood with Maya and Maria outside the school gates. The crowd had thinned, kids had gone home, and the crayon "Daddy Day" banner hung crooked now, half torn by the wind. Maya skipped ahead on the pavement, holding her paper crown in one hand like it was made of gold. David turned to Maria, his tone quiet, but sure. "There's a small restaurant nearby. Quiet, good food. Would you let me take you both?" Maria blinked. She looked down at her shoes, scuffed from hours of cleaning. Her first instinct was to say no. Too fast, too soon, too complicated. But Maya looked up at her just then, hopeful, eyes shining with the leftover magic of the day. Maria nodded. "Okay," she said. "Just dinner." The bistro was small and warm, tucked between a pharmacy and a tailor's shop. Its windows glowed gold under the evening sky, and the tables were draped with simple cloths that smelled faintly of rosemary. They sat in a corner booth. Maya immediately began flipping through the kids' menu. "Do they have mac and cheese with the crunchy bits on top?" she asked eagerly. David smiled. "They do now," he said, signaling to the waiter. "Extra crunchy." Maria laughed quietly, her hands wrapped around a glass of cold water. She hadn't laughed like that in weeks. Dinner was easy. Surprisingly so. Maya talked the entire time. About her poem, her teacher, a classmate named Jacob who insisted dinosaurs could swim. David listened. Really listened. He asked follow-up questions, nodded, laughed in the right places. Maria watched him across the table, unsure what to make of the man now folding a paper napkin into what Maya called a butterfly that looks like a duck. She had expected charm, maybe formality. Not this warmth, not this man who leaned forward every time Maya spoke like her words were stock market secrets. Then came dessert, vanilla cake with 2 spoons, and a drawing. Maya pulled it from her backpack, crumpled slightly but still bright. 3 stick figures under a yellow sun, 1 tall, 1 medium, 1 small, with puffs in her hair, all of them smiling. Above them, in big block letters, she had written, "Me, Mommy, and my daddy." Maria gasped softly. David stared at the paper like it was something holy. "That's us," Maya said proudly. "I drew it after story time." He didn't speak. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came. The silence wasn't awkward. It was sacred. Then David set his fork down, slowly, carefully, and said, "I had a son." Maria looked up. His name was James. He would have been 8 now. The air went still. "I missed his first school project," David continued, voice low. "He asked me to help him build a volcano. I promised the next one." He looked away, jaw clenched. "That morning my wife begged me to come. I had a meeting. I said I couldn't, so she took him alone." Maria's hand covered her mouth. "They were hit by a drunk driver. 2 blocks from the school." Silence fell like a blanket. David didn't cry, but his voice cracked as he added, "I missed every moment that mattered." He looked up at Maria, his eyes red, his expression raw, and now I live with the echo of their absence. Across the table, Maya had gone quiet. She reached out with her small hand and placed it gently on his. David looked at her, startled by the softness of her touch. Maria reached across and laid her hand over both of theirs. Not to fix, not to save, but to say, "You're not alone anymore." And under the quiet lights of a little restaurant, something began to shift. Not fast, but forever. David didn't sleep that night. Not because of deals, not because of deadlines, but because of a little girl who had held his hand, and because of a memory he couldn't outrun. He sat alone in his study, the city humming far below, and stared at an old photograph he hadn't looked at in years. James, dark hair, curious eyes, a volcano model half-finished on the kitchen counter the last time. David had promised he'd help. That promise had been broken before lunchtime. That had been the last morning. David ran a thumb along the edge of the photo. His voice had been missing from every story time, every school play, every tiny moment that built a childhood. Until yesterday, until Maya. The next afternoon, Maria stood behind the counter at the diner, apron tied, hair pulled back. It had been a good shift, quiet, steady, the kind of day that made rent seem a little less impossible, until her manager called her into the office. He didn't meet her eyes. "I'm sorry," he muttered, "but we've been asked to let you go." Maria blinked. "What? Why?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "Word's gotten out that you're involved with someone. What does that have to do with my job?" He didn't answer, but she knew. David. The building the diner leased from, owned by his company. Customers whispering about seeing him walk her home, having dinner together. the glitter crown on his head, the picture Maya drew. "They think you're playing angles," the manager added awkwardly. "I'm not," she whispered. "I'm not asking him for anything." "I know," he said quietly, "but perception is everything." That was it. No discussion, no warning, just done. Hours later, Maria sat on a bench at the bus stop, arms wrapped around herself like armor. Maya sat beside her, quiet. She didn't understand everything, but she knew her mom was hurting. "Are we in trouble?" she asked softly. Maria shook her head, voice hoarse. "Just tired, baby. Just really tired." Then came the headlights. A black car slowed at the curb. The back door opened before the engine even cut, and David stepped out. His coat was unbuttoned, his tie loosened, but his eyes, sharp, warm, sure, went straight to them. Maria looked up, startled, wiping her face. "What are you doing here?" she asked, trying to stay composed. But David didn't answer her. Instead, he knelt in front of Maya. His voice was low, fierce with feeling. "No one gets to hurt your mommy. Not while I'm here." Maya blinked, then threw her arms around his neck. Maria watched them, heart racing. David stood and turned to her. "She lost her job," he said, "because of me." "It's not your fault," Maria said softly. "Yes, it is," he replied. "And I don't intend to let it stay that way." 2 days later, Maria stepped into the quiet, high-ceilinged offices of the Blake Foundation. The receptionist smiled. The floors gleamed. "And Maya?" She came sprinting down the hallway, yelling, "Daddy!" David caught her midair and lifted her effortlessly. David smiled, brushing her hair back. "Always." Then he looked at Maria. "I want you here," he said gently. "As part of my foundation, leading a new family outreach program. Helping kids like Maya, and parents like you." Maria's eyes filled. "I don't want charity." "It's not charity," David said. "It's a second chance." She looked at him, then at Maya, and for the first time Maria realized maybe second chances don't come wrapped in money. Maybe they come wrapped in intention, in someone showing up, in love that doesn't ask but offers. She stepped forward. "I'll take it," she whispered. David smiled and pulled them both into a quiet, unshakable embrace. It didn't happen all at once. There was no big speech, no promises, no headlines, just quiet moments. David started coming by their home, first to drop off forms for Maria's new job, then to return Maya's lunchbox, then just because he wanted to be there. He brought books, not the fancy kind, simple ones, about dogs that danced and trucks that talked, and monsters who brushed their teeth. At first he read them stiffly, like someone unused to speaking in soft tones. But Maya didn't care. She laughed at every line, gasped at every twist. "Do the silly voice," she'd beg, poking his side. David would try, and fail, and she'd laugh harder. Every day when the last page came, Maya would curl closer to his side and whisper, "One more page, Daddy?" And every time, without fail, David said, "Yes." Maria would stand in the doorway, arms folded, watching. She tried not to fall, tried not to believe too much, but it was impossible, because David didn't just read. He noticed when Maya's shoe was too tight and loosened the lace. He fixed the wobbly leg on her favorite chair without being asked. He listened. He saw her. He saw both of them. One evening, after Maya had drifted to sleep, her head nestled on his chest, David stayed in the rocking chair. Maria approached quietly with a blanket, draping it over his shoulders. He didn't move. "She's changing you," she said softly. David looked up. His voice was raw, honest. "No, she's reminding me who I used to be." Maria didn't say anything. She just sat beside him. The silence between them was warm. Weeks passed. Laughter returned to their home. So did music. So did the quiet safety of being seen. David started leaving work early, because he wanted to. He brought home paint sets and silly string. He watched cartoons he didn't understand. He even helped Maya build a rocket ship out of cereal boxes. At dinner, she'd tell him about her day in ridiculous detail. And he'd listen. Every word. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. One Friday evening, Maria found Maya lying on the couch, quiet. She wasn't hungry. Her cheeks were warm. "Sweetheart?" Maria knelt, feeling her forehead. It was burning. The thermometer read 103 degrees. Maria's heart slammed into her chest. She ran to the sink for cold towels, called pediatrician, fumbled with panic. David was there within minutes. He didn't knock. Just walked in, loosened his tie, and dropped beside Maya's bed. She whimpered in her sleep. He took her hand, brushed her damp curls back. "It's okay," he whispered. "You're safe. I've got you." But then, barely awake, Maya stirred. Her voice broke. "Don't leave me too, Daddy." David froze. Something inside him cracked wide open. He hadn't cried since James, not even at the funeral. But tonight, tears fell, silently. He held Maya close, rocked her, whispered to her like she was something sacred. "I'm not going anywhere. I promise." He stayed all night, didn't move, didn't sleep, just held on. And when dawn broke and Maya's fever eased, he was still there, eyes red, shirt wrinkled, heart wide open. Maria walked in and saw it all. And in that moment, she understood. This man wasn't pretending. This wasn't pity. It was love. Deep, terrifying, unfiltered love. Not just for Maya, but for her too. It was a quiet Sunday, the kind where the light poured through the window like honey, and the apartment smelled faintly of soap and cinnamon toast. Maya sat cross-legged on the floor, drawing. David was beside her, trying to help her color a giraffe, but ending up with blue spots instead of yellow. Maria laughed from the kitchen, apron tied around her waist. It felt like peace. But peace has a way of being interrupted. There was a knock at the door, a firm, authoritative knock, the kind that carries history in its echo. Maria wiped her hands and walked over. When she opened the door, she froze. On the porch stood a man in a stiff suit. Late 30s, clean-shaven, cold eyes. She gripped the doorknob tightly. "Maria," he said. Maria's voice caught in her throat. It was Robert, Maya's biological father, the man who left before Maya was even born. Behind her, David rose slowly. Maya looked up from the floor, sensing something had shifted. Robert took a step forward. "I heard," he said, eyes flicking toward David, "that some billionaire has been playing house with my daughter." Maria stepped in front of the doorway, protective. "You don't get to call her that," she said firmly. "You left." Robert ignored her. His tone sharpened. "I'm her father, Maria. I have rights. And I want custody." David moved beside Maria, calm but alert. "She doesn't even know you," Maria snapped. "She should," Robert replied coolly. "She deserves to know where she really comes from, and not grow up confused, thinking some stranger is her father." He looked at David with open disdain. "I'm filing for joint custody," Robert added. "Or full, if you try to fight me." Maria's breath hitched. David's voice was quiet but resolute. "You weren't there when she was born. You weren't there for her first words, her first steps, or her first tears. That's not being a father. That's being a ghost." Robert's jaw tightened. "We'll see what the court says," he spat, before turning and walking away, leaving behind a tremble in the walls of everything they'd built. The courtroom was tense. Maria sat beside David. Maya was beside them, swinging her legs, her hand tucked into David's. Across the aisle, Robert sat tall in a dark gray suit, eyes sharp, expression unreadable. He spoke first. "I made mistakes. I was scared. I left, yes. But I've changed. I've started a business, gotten my life together. I want to be part of my daughter's life now." He turned to the judge. "She has a right to know her real father." Maria stood slowly. "Your Honor," she said, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. "Robert left before Maya was born. He never called, never wrote, never asked if she was okay." She turned, her voice cracking. "She cried for a dad. She asked me every night why she didn't have one. And now, after 6 years, he shows up, not because he loves her, but because someone else finally did." The judge nodded solemn. Then a small voice rose. "Can I say something?" All eyes turned. Maya stood, tiny but brave. She walked forward. "My name is Maya," she said. "And I already have a daddy." Robert's face twitched. "My real daddy is the one who showed up, who held my hand, who came when I asked and stayed when I needed him." She turned to David. "He claps the loudest at my poems. He reads to me. He makes Mommy laugh again." Then back to the judge. "I don't need someone who left. I need someone who stayed." The courtroom went silent. And then The judge spoke clearly. "Because of everything I've heard today, and how close Maya is to Mr. David, and since Mr. Robert was gone for so long, I am denying Mr. Robert's request for custody." Maria gasped softly and covered her mouth with her hand. Tears filled her eyes. Maya stood still for a second. Then suddenly, she smiled and ran straight to David. "Daddy!" she shouted as she hugged him tightly. David bent down and caught her in his arms. He held her close, his eyes full of tears. He didn't say anything. He just held her like she was the most important thing in the world. Across the room, Robert didn't move. He sat frozen, staring at them. His hands were tight on the table. His jaw was clenched. But there was no anger now, only regret. He looked at Maya one last time and saw the truth. She had already chosen someone else. Not him. He had left when she needed him. And now, she didn't need him anymore. He stood up slowly. He didn't say a word. He didn't fight. He just walked out of the courtroom, alone. No one followed him. No one stopped him. He didn't even look back. And as the heavy door closed behind him, he was gone. Inside the courtroom, David still held Maya. Maria came to them, wrapping her arms around both of them. And in that quiet moment, standing together, they were no longer just people trying to hold things together. They were a real family, a family that stayed. A week later, the skies were pale and still. The world outside their apartment moved slowly. Children playing in courtyards, buses humming along the road, and laundry dancing quietly on lines in the breeze. Maria stood by the window, staring down at a cream-colored envelope in her hand. It had come that morning, a large official-looking envelope with her name typed in bold letters. She hadn't opened it yet. She didn't need to. She already knew what it was. A letter from the Northbridge Developmental Institute, one of the most prestigious research programs in the country. A place she'd once dreamed of working at back in college, before life changed, before Maya, before cleaning jobs and long nights spent stretching coins and courage. She finally opened it, and read the first line. "We are pleased to offer you a position." She blinked hard, lips parting in a breath that felt like a gasp. Her heart swelled, but then, immediately, it sank. Northbridge was too far from Maya's school, too far from David, too far from this fragile little life they were building. Quietly, carefully, like stacking glass, she placed the letter on the table just as David walked in, holding a small paper bag. "I brought muffins," he said, grinning. Maria didn't smile. She looked up at him, eyes full of storm clouds. "I got it," she whispered. David paused, instantly reading her face. "The job." She nodded. He crossed the room slowly. "Congratulations, Maria, that's—" "I'm not taking it," she said quickly, his brow furrowed. "Why not?" "Because I can't move Maya again. And she's happy here. And you're here?" David stared at her for a long moment, his jaw tight. Then he walked closer, voice low. "Maria, you don't walk away from dreams. You take them with you." She shook her head. "But if I leave, I might lose what we have." "If you leave and this ends," he said softly, "then it wasn't real to begin with." Her breath caught. He took her hands. "I think it's real," he said. "I think it's terrifying and beautiful and inconveniently timed. But I want to believe in it." Maria swallowed hard. "You'd move? For me?" "For you. For Maya. For us." He said it like it was the most natural thing in the world. She looked up at him. This man she'd once seen only in store posters and news articles. Now standing barefoot in her kitchen, holding her fears like they were made of glass. And something inside her broke open. Hope. She took his hand and held it tight. No words, just belief. Just the beginning of something real. It was a Friday evening when David told them to dress nicely. No explanations. Just a smile that made Maria raise a brow and Maya squeal with curiosity. The sun was setting as they drove, painting the sky in golden oranges and soft lavender. Maya pressed her nose to the car window, watching the clouds drift by like cotton dreams. When they pulled into the underground parking of David's building, Maria recognized it. But tonight felt different. They stepped into the elevator, pressed the button for the rooftop, and when the doors opened, Maria gasped. Maya froze, her mouth hanging open. It was a garden, a rooftop garden strung with soft golden fairy lights that shimmered like stars. A small table sat in the center, dressed in white linen, with 3 delicate plates and silver cutlery. Candles flickered gently in the wind. Cupcakes sat on a tray beside crystal glasses filled with sparkling juice. Maya squealed. "This looks like a party. Is it someone's birthday?" David smiled. "Kind of." He pulled out the chair for Maya and then for Maria. As they sat, waiters quietly served their meals. Small portions of things Maya couldn't pronounce, but she giggled with every bite. Halfway through dinner, Maya found a small box on her plate. It hadn't been there before. She blinked at it. Her name was written on it in careful handwriting. She looked at David. "What's this?" "Open it," he said gently. Inside the box was a delicate silver necklace. Tiny, simple, with 1 word carved in a charm, family. And on the back, forever. Maya gasped. "It's for me," she whispered. David nodded. "You taught me what that word means," he said softly. "And I want you to remember, no matter where life takes us, you always have me." Maya flung her arms around him. "You're my forever daddy now." She whispered into his coat. David closed his eyes and held her. And then he turned to Maria. He stood slowly and reached into his coat pocket again. A second box, slightly bigger. Maria's hand flew to her mouth as he knelt beside her chair. "Maria," he began. His voice was steady, but his eyes weren't. "You walked into my world like a storm. Messy, sudden, beautiful, and turned it into a home." She choked a breath, already trembling. "I don't want temporary. I don't want convenient. I want real." He opened the box. Inside was a simple silver ring. Timeless. No diamonds. Just grace. "Will you be my family?" he asked. "For real?" Tears spilled down Maria's cheeks. She nodded, unable to speak, and collapsed into his arms. "Yes," she finally whispered. "Yes, David." Behind them, Maya clapped her hands in delight. "Can I be the flower girl?" David laughed, holding them both. "You're going to be so much more than that." The chapel was small, not grand, not gilded, but beautiful in its own quiet way. Soft light poured in through tall arched windows. White roses lined the aisle. The scent of something sweet and hopeful filled the air. Guests sat in gentle silence. A few close friends. Some employees from the toy store. The school teacher who adored Maya. Even the security guard who always greeted them at the toy shop door. It wasn't a crowd. It was a circle of love, of second chances. Then came the sound of soft piano music, and all eyes turned to the entrance. Maya appeared first. She wore a white dress that puffed slightly at the bottom, with a sparkly silver sash tied in a bow at the back. Her shoes tapped gently on the floor as she walked, her hands clutching a basket full of rose petals. She took her job seriously. Every few steps she reached in and tossed a small handful. Some landed in neat piles. Some missed completely. She didn't care. She smiled at everyone, waved once at the pastor, and beamed up at David, who was already standing at the front in a tailored navy suit, his hands a little shaky. When Maya reached him, she tugged his sleeve and whispered, "Don't cry too early." He chuckled under his breath and nodded. Then the music shifted. Maria stepped into view, and the room, every breath in it, paused. She wore a simple ivory dress with lace sleeves. Her hair was pinned back, a few tendrils falling softly around her face. She carried no bouquet. She didn't need one. Her smile was all she needed to carry. David's eyes welled. He had seen her tired. He had seen her scared. But this was Maria lit from the inside. She walked slowly, her steps careful, eyes locked on his. And when she reached him, Maya stepped forward, gently placing both of their hands together. The pastor didn't speak right away. He just smiled. Because sometimes, moments speak for themselves. The vows were not rehearsed, not perfect, just real. "I didn't believe in second chances," David said, his voice thick with emotion, "until I met 2 girls who made me want to be better. Not for the world, but for them." Maria blinked through tears. "I thought love was always about losing something," she whispered. "But with you, I found myself again. I found safety. I found family." Maya sniffled, loudly. Everyone laughed softly. Then the pastor asked the final question. "Do you, David, take Maria and Maya into your heart? Forever?" David knelt slightly and looked at Maya. "I do," Maya nodded proudly, like she had trained him herself. And Maria, do you take David? Maria's voice cracked. I already have. When they kissed, the room erupted in gentle applause. Maya threw her petals straight into the air and jumped. David scooped her up into his arms. You were the one who picked me first, he whispered. She giggled into his shoulder. Best thing I ever bought with $2 and a button. The wedding was over. The guests had gone. The music had stopped. But in the quiet that followed, something beautiful remained. Home, that night, back in David's penthouse. No longer a place of glass and cold air, but of giggles and warm footsteps. Maya, curled up in bed wearing her new pajamas with tiny stars on them. The silver family necklace still hung around her neck. David sat beside her, a book in hand. Just one story, Maria said from the hallway with a smile. She's had a big day. Maya grinned up at David, already tucking the covers around herself. Can we read The Bear Who Wanted a Hug again? David opened the book. That's the 3rd time this week. Maya raised her brows dramatically. Because it's the best one. Like ever. He sighed in mock defeat. All right. But this time I get to do the bear voice. Maya burst into laughter. You always mess it up. David cleared his throat and started reading, his voice slipping into the deep, funny growl she loved. She snuggled closer, her little hand reaching for his as she listened. By the time he got to page 5, her eyes had started to close. But still, she whispered, one more page, Daddy. He paused, just to take that in. Daddy! It didn't matter that it wasn't biology, or paper, or time. What they had was more real than all of it. He read on, softly, slowly, and when her breathing evened out, when her chest rose and fell in the rhythm of peaceful dreams, he closed the book and kissed her forehead. Maria stood quietly in the doorway, her arms folded, her eyes shining. David stood, walked over to her, and wrapped his arms around her waist. She leaned into him, her voice barely audible. Do you think she'll remember all this? Years from now? David looked back at the little girl, with the necklace that sparkled faintly in the nightlight. She'll remember how it felt, he said. Safe, loved, enough. And Maria whispered back, that's all that matters. They turned off the light, closed the door, and in the soft hush of night, the smallest voice murmured sleepily into her pillow. Best day ever? 3 months later, it began with a knock at the toy store. David had opened late that day, wanting to surprise Maya with a new dollhouse that he'd helped design. It had tiny chairs, tiny curtains, even a tiny mailbox with a red flag. He was crouched near the display when the knock came. A woman in a tan coat stood outside the glass doors. Not a customer. A reporter. She held a small microphone and wore a press badge clipped to her scarf. David stood slowly, brows furrowed. Maria, who had just arrived to drop off Maya's lunchbox, gave him a questioning look. Mr. David? The reporter asked gently as he opened the door. Do you have a moment? David eyed the camera crew behind her and replied carefully. What's this about? The woman smiled. We've been following a story about a little girl who walked into a toy shop with $2 and a button and asked for a dad. David froze. Maya's story had quietly spread. First through the school, then through a teacher's blog, then across social media. Thousands had read the post. Many cried. Some said it gave them hope. Now the media wanted more. We'd love to interview you, the reporter said. Just a short piece. The world needs to hear stories like this. Stories that remind us what matters. David hesitated. Maria touched his arm. It's okay, she said softly. Tell them. They sat near the stuffed animal aisle, Maya bouncing on a beanbag beside them. And the camera rolled. David spoke simply. About the moment Maya stood at the counter with nothing but 2 wrinkled bills, a button, and a heart full of hope. About the way she cracked something open in him that day. Something he didn't even know was still alive. He spoke about Maria, how strength doesn't always shout, and how she reminded him that dignity can survive even the hardest winters. Then Maya climbed into his lap and smiled at the camera. I didn't buy a real daddy, she said proudly. But I got one anyway. The video aired the next night. It went viral. People from all over the country, then the world, reached out. Parents, teachers, widows, children, people, who had given up on connection, suddenly felt seen again. Donations poured into the toy store's foundation. Letters arrived daily, handwritten notes, thanking them for reminding the world that family isn't about perfection. It's about presence. And in the middle of all of it, David, Maria, Maya, just trying to live their quiet little life. One morning, Maya tugged on David's sleeve while he read the paper. "Daddy?" He looked up. "Yes, love." "Do you think other kids like me are still looking?" He set the paper down. "For a daddy?" "For someone. Anyone who'll show up." He pulled her into his arms, holding her close as the morning light poured in. His voice, steady and full of promise, wrapped around her like a vow. "Then we'll help them," he said. "Every single one." And just like that, it wasn't just a toy store anymore. It became a lighthouse. For the lonely, for the forgotten, for every child who ever wondered if they were worth showing up for. They didn't just stock shelves or sell dolls. They built bridges. They handed out second chances wrapped in ribbon and kindness. Because David, Maria, and Maya had learned something simple but life-changing. That love doesn't need perfect timing or matching blood. It just needs someone brave enough to stay. And from that day forward, they made it their mission to be that someone for as many hearts as they could reach. Because family isn't just who you're born with. It's who walks in and never lets go. The end. Thank you for watching. If this story touched you, leave a comment below. Like, share, and subscribe for more stories that speak to the heart. And remember, family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the ones who choose to stay. Every day. Because real love shows up, even when it's hard.